Donut Bag is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Your data is your business. Protect it with ExpressVPN. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to the link listed in my Twitter profile. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Donut Bag, part of the Pod Hub Network. This episode, I welcome back Nick Farabaugh, and we do our final NFL draft preview. I've been talking to him and other people for months about this draft. I am sick of it. I am so, just done. I'm done with it. I just want this to be over with. I want them to just make the picks already. I'm recording this on Tuesday night. Let's just get it over with. I'm just so excited for it to finally happen. It's like Christmas. It's like a wedding. It's like something you talk about for a long time, and it finally happened. So let's just get it over with. Maybe, and this is kind of like a wedding. It's the Steelers are going to be married to some of these players for years. So. Hey, some marriages last about as long as a rookie NFL deal. So hey, it kind of works out. So anyway, here is my talk about the NFL draft with Nick Farabaugh. The Donut Bag starts right now. Colbert and Tomlin had their press conference, and boy, was it nice that they did it in person. It made me think that things are back to normal. They had it not a virtual thing. It was actually in person, and it warmed my heart because they've had these press conferences every year, a few days or a week before the draft, and just like every other year, it's an annual tradition. They say nothing. Did Colbert or Tomlin really say anything in the press conference about what they're going to do in the draft?
Well, I do think you could take a few things from it. I don't think it was completely, coach speak. I think there was definitely an aspect of gamesmanship in there from Colbert. And of course, Tomlin, his usual self, if you will. Coach Tomlin has coach speak down to a T. And the only reason he says anything explicit is, he has a point to it, right? Like calling out the guys for the drops is to put them on blast, right? Like doesn't say anything of substance. But actually, I thought Colbert gave us some pretty good info today. And I can kind of take a few directions from it, which we'll probably get into in this draft. In this talk. But you can definitely see that the Steelers are running backs in play, but it's not a certainty. They definitely give you their thoughts on the whole draft as a whole. I do like that Colbert does that. He's transparent, but he's not transparent to the point of telegraphing. So I do think we got a little bit from Colbert today.
Haven't they kind of, with their moves they've done before this, haven't they kind of telegraphed that, got it, they have to pick a running back in the first couple rounds? There's almost a backup. There's almost a contingency plan at every position, but running back, it's almost like they're telegraphing that they're going to get a running back early.
Well, I think they are to a degree telegraphing that they're interested. Now, I would preclude this. I think the more I've heard them talk and the more I've kind of thought about it, I think it's really just one running back. I think it's just Najee Harris. I don't really there are question marks to me with the makeup of Travis Etienne's gate that would preclude that from being a first round pick potentially for them. First of all, he's not good in pass pro. He doesn't have great vision. Those two things kind of worry me, because if you want him to be your lead back, well, that you need him to pass pro, and there's not really a great pass protecting back on the roster right now. Basel is probably the best one. So that's an issue with that Etienne one. I think they definitely telegraphed their interest in Najee Harris, and now I think they backed that up today. I think there were a lot of things that said the pick will be Najee Harris. He doesn't have medical concerns. They talked about that they really want to trust the staff, the coaching staff, the college coaching staff that they talked to. I think they really trust the Alabama coaching staff. Najee Harris is obviously at a position of need. He's probably going to be one of the best players available. And I think they went to his pro day, kind of just checks a lot of the boxes that they look for. So I definitely think they've telegraphed the Najee interest. But I don't know. Kind of when you hear Colbert talk about, when you hear Tomlin speak on what they're going to do, I do think that they're a little bit more open to other positions.
Speaking of the medicals, I think this year is almost unlike any other in that they don't have all the medical information. And if they want the medical information, it might still be coming in, even by Thursday or Friday, they might still be getting medical information on some players. Is that going to be a big issue for the Steelers and some of the players they want? I can think of two players where it's a huge deal, Caleb Farley and Landon Dickerson, but is that a unique situation for this year that they just don't have all the medical information on some of these players?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something where you look at least what the Steelers are going to be looking at, and perhaps that's something that they would take into account. If you don't, obviously you have a clean medical history for the most part, that they would take the guy, kind of how with the opt-out thing, they would probably take the guy with the cleaner sheet. Now they did say that I think that their guys really did a lot of medical evaluating. They feel pretty good about it. It's now it is definitely complex, and I think without having the combine there, you obviously don't get your hands on enough players. I think they only said 150. Usually you have upwards of 250, 300. So obviously, and you're working with different doctors. You're not just working with the staff. So you have to have people you can trust. And I think that for sure, this is definitely going to be an issue that teams, not just the Steelers, I think every team is going to have to weigh their risks with guys like Dickerson, with guys like Farley, as you mentioned, and other guys, obviously, in later rounds. We're kind of starting to hear about, just today, Azeez Ojulari. Apparently, a knee issues popped up with him. Obviously, Jalen Phillips out of Miami, the edge, has a history of concussion issues. So I think these medical checks are one of the biggest parts of the NFL combine that usually happens. And the fact that teams now, really can't get their own doctors to evaluate them. It's just an NFL mandated group. I think this is a very big thing to watch. And maybe guys with more medical questions can slip further than we would expect.
If they don't go Najee Harris in the first round, who are they taking? When they go in linebacker, are they going tackle? Are they going cornerback? Are they who knows what? What do you think is a non Najee Harris pick at 24?
Well, I think the other name that came to mind immediately was JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. You kind of saw Tomlin and Colbert were asked about what they look for in linebackers and kind of, what they want. And they immediately said high football IQ, versatility, lateral ability, and coverage ability. And I can't think of a better linebacker than Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah for that. So I think he's a guy. If he's there 24 and Najee's there, I still don't know who they're going to take. Like, that's a toss-up of toss-ups. I think he fits everything they look for. And I think he can be a slot corner, safety depth. I think he can give you all that. Like, they need it. So I think JOK is a definite possibility. I think even though they weren't at his pro day, I think they kind of talked about this, how they were more selective. They usually go to about 13, 14 pro days. They only went to 9 this year, Tomlin and Colbert. So makes me think maybe we can have a possibility of a non-pro day guy be a pick. And maybe Tevin Jenkins is that guy. I think they have good connections in Stillwater. They've obviously selected guys there, James Washington, Mason Rudolph. So they have probably inroads there and connections with Mike Gundy's staff. So I think that that's a possibility. And you just kind of look down the board. Asante Samuel Jr., I think, is a possibility at corner. They have a ton of connections in the Virginia area. Tomlin's from there. So Caleb Farley, as we mentioned. I still believe that also, I think we can't rule out potentially other tackles other than just Jenkins, like Leatherwood, Eichenberg are in that range. I think Liam Eichenberg's a slept on candidate as well. They're at his pro day. So these are possible guys. I think we're kind of down to 4 positions. Again, I can't see Landon Dickerson. They haven't shown strong enough interest to me in Creed Humphrey, but it's possible that they try him. But I think it's going to be down to a corner, a linebacker, a running back, or a tackle. That's my personal feel from what I got out of that press conference.
So if it's not Najee Harris in the first round, if they don't take a running back, they're getting What are the options then? Because if they don't take Harris in the first round, he'll be gone by the time they draft the 55. ATN will be gone, probably Javonte Williams. So what do they do? Do they get like a Gainwell or a Trey Sermon, or do they try to trade up in the second round? What do you think they would do in that scenario?
Well, Colbert talked about this, and he said that it was a deep class. So they clearly have guys they like outside of just Najee and Etienne and Javante. I would assume one of the guys that they really like is probably Michael Carter out of UNC. You know, they watched him at North Carolina, and I thought he was a guy. Maybe he's not, this lead dog. He's about 5'9", 210. He's built really well for that size, but he can be a 1A lead of the committee type of guy. And now, obviously, you would be relying a little bit on your other guys there with, hoping Anthony McFarland steps up and maybe getting a little bit from Benny Snell, Caitlin Balaj, Jalen Samuels, whoever kind of rises from that crop of the group. Maybe you sign another guy as well. But I think Carter can bring the heat. I think he's one of the most developed backs in the class. So I think you would really look at him potentially. I think Gainwell, as you mentioned, is a really good receiver, pretty good pass blocker as well, and is a pretty good natural runner. Sermon obviously fits everything they do. He's not a developed receiver, but he's a really good pass protector, has really good athleticism all around. I think he's a guy that you could look at. And just going down the board, guys like Elijah Mitchell, Khalil Herbert, Chuba Hubbard's obviously a name that people will throw out beyond just that. I'm not a huge Chuba Hubbard fan, but I do think he could be in contention again because there are those connections down there in Stillwater for the Steelers. Jamar Jefferson, Ramondre Stevenson, Kylan Hill. I mean, there are names to be had here.
What about Zaven Collins? I am convinced he is not going to be picked by the Steelers at 24. What do you think?
I mentioned that the non-pro day guys, and I think Zaven's one of the lesser names. One, because he might not be there, and he's getting a lot of hype up to Arizona at 16. I've heard his name even mentioned at Dallas at 10, and Dallas now wants to trade back. Perhaps he's a possible pick for them in a trade back scenario. I think Zaven, though, when you look at what they look for in a linebacker, he has those traits, but it sounded like they were looking for a coverage linebacker. I don't think Zaven Collins is a bad coverage linebacker. I'm not saying that, but he's more of a buck downhill linebacker. Someone like a JOK, a Jabril Cox, a Pete Werner, a Cam McGrone, someone like that. That's more developed and fleshed out as a coverage backer. And I think they're looking for more of a coverage backer to cover the horizontal game that is the NFL now. So I don't think they're looking as much for those downhill guys. And I love what Zaven Collins brings. I just don't think it's exactly what they're looking for. Now, they could be very interested in him. And again, I don't know the connections they have at the Tulsa program. So this is a guy, I think Zaven Collins in a normal year, when they go to 13, 14 pro days, I think Collins might be a guy that they would want to go down there and visit. Obviously, they couldn't do that this year. So I do kind of put lesser likelihood of him being picked. But I do think that Zaven Collins is a very talented football player and would be happy if the Steelers picked him.
One of the topics of the day is, should the Steelers try to get Justin Fields? I think there's a better chance of me winning the lottery, but still, if he happens to fall, I don't know, out of the top 10, out of 15, I don't know. Do you see any scenario where they could trade up to get Justin Fields? And should they? Do you think he's a good enough prospect that he could be the quarterback of the future?
Well, first of all, if they can, they should. It's no question. I think Justin Fields should be the pick at 2. I think the Jets are making a mistake picking Zach Wilson. So I would pick him if he fell and they traded up. Yes, I would do it. I think he's got accuracy at all 3 levels of the field. He's mobile, can break, contain, runs like Cam Newton in the open field. He's very intelligent and is improving as a processor. He's got to improve a little bit on his pocket presence overall, kind of how he manages the pocket, but I think he's learning how to do that. I think overall this is a guy that has all the talent in the world, and yes, he should be worthy of that. Now, do I think it's going to happen? No, because I don't really have faith in him dropping very far. First of all, they'd have to outbid New England. They'd have to outbid Chicago, Washington. Those teams have better picks to offer than the Steelers. Obviously, if a team like the Panthers is sitting there at 8, they could take A team like, say, the Eagles, maybe they want a Justin Fields. We talked about them maybe potentially getting a quarterback before they traded back to 12. Perhaps Fields is now in range for them to go up and get. There are the Broncos, another team that could get him. So there are teams here that could obviously go up and get Justin Fields, and I think we have to. The Falcons could pick him at 4 too. Obviously, that's a possibility. So I don't see a scenario unless the league is so low on him that the Steelers go up and get Justin Fields. He'd have to fall far enough to where the Steelers would be able to jump Washington and Chicago. He'd have to fall past New England, in my opinion. They'd have to go somewhere between that 16 to 18 range and hop up above Washington and Chicago. I can't see him falling that far. I think Bill Belichick's too smart to pass on Justin Fields. I think he would take him in a heartbeat. And I think the Steelers should do it if they can do it. I think they should trade into the top 10 if he is there. But again, I don't think they have the ammo to do it.
I think the first 5 of the first 7 picks are going to be quarterbacks. I think it's just like you mentioned. New England wants a quarterback. Denver, possibly Carolina, possibly Chicago. I think they're all going to trade up, and they're going to kind of do what 49ers did. You know, the 49ers said, well, we're trading up. We know what the first 2 picks are. We're going to get the best pick after that. And then we're going to get what we want. And I think somebody is going to make a monster offer to Atlanta, or maybe Atlanta will take them. So, I mean, do you think 5 of the first 7 picks will be quarterbacks?
I don't know if they will. I mean, I think it's possible. But you kind of have to see who the Niners take, right? Like, this is me personally thinking. I think if Mac Jones isn't taken at 3, I think he'll experience a sharper fall. And I think Washington or Chicago would be the team that would end up picking him. But if someone like a Trey Lance or Justin Fields obviously falls and Mac Jones is the pick at 3, it kind of depends at that point. Well, what I think Atlanta loves Lance. We've kind of heard that, but I can't see Lance really falling past 8. And yeah, you mentioned it. There's so many trade up teams. So in the first 7 picks, maybe. I think in the first 10, I think they'll all be gone by the time the Cowboys are on the clock. That's kind of what I'm feeling. Or at the very least, it probably stops there with the Cowboys' willingness to trade back. I think the Cowboys would trade back with New England at 15. I think they trade back with Chicago. I don't think they trade back with Washington, but I think that they would definitely trade back. So you kind of look at that, and I think you look at what they offer, and teams are going to be willing to trade up for their franchise quarterback because they need him. I mean, the Patriots, if they get Justin Fields, are instantly a contender. Like, that's the type of thing that they could do. With him and Cam, you let them go from Brady to Cam to Fields. I mean, that would be disgusting. But yeah, I think it's very feasible. We see quarterbacks off like that.
What is the deal with Mac Jones? I just don't see it. I mean, from everything I hear, he's going at 3 to San Francisco. Am I missing something here? I just don't see anything special about this guy.
I don't think you are. Listen, this is a guy that is a facilitator first. He's a guy cut from the same cloth as Jimmy Garoppolo. And I don't get why the 49ers are loving him. I think he's a better pocket mover than Garoppolo. He's pretty solid in the pocket. I will say that. I think he moves well. I think he knows how to feel pressure. I think he keeps his eyes downfield. I think he's very disciplined. In the pocket, he doesn't get rushed. And he has a good internal clock. But I do think he's a guy, when you kind of look at him, what does he do to elevate your team? He doesn't have great accuracy. I think that's an overselling point. I'm not sold on his processing ability. I think that's an oversold point on him as well. I think he's had shoddy processing ability. I think he's been bailed out by simple scheme and extreme talent around him. I think this guy's a round 2, round 3 player that people are hyping up far too much. I think he was in the perfect ecosystem to play. He's got a great O-line. He's got great weapons. He's got great running back, everything you look for. This guy had. And I do think that Mac Jones doesn't have great physical tools. I don't think he's going to break structure and break contain and elevate your team in that way. He doesn't make some of the very tough, tight window throws at the NFL level that you'll need. So this is a guy that I think can be a decent quarterback. But is he a franchise quarterback? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't see anything special there. What do you think Atlanta does? They have a lot of options. They could go Kyle Pitts. They could go quarterback. They could trade back. What do you think they'll do?
Yeah, Atlanta, the feel I'm getting from Atlanta I think Atlanta is very likely to go Kyle Pitts. I think Pitts kind of fits what they need as a receiver. I think you can upgrade on what they have, and especially with the Julio Jones trade rumors now that we're hearing, I think he's a very likely option for them at 4. Again, they need that alpha receiver if Julio is out of there. Now, even with Julio, you look at that, what they can do. I think they add a supreme receiving weapon in a win now window potentially. Obviously, they need to improve that defense, but it's a very possible scenario. I get the feeling they're going to go Pitts. That's kind of what I think. But if Lance is on the board, I think they might go Lance. So my top 2 for them, I would think, would be Lance or Kyle Pitts.
Then what do the Bengals do? Do they go wide receiver or take Penny Sewell?
I think they're going to go Jamar Chase. Just what we've been hearing. I think that they believe this is a deep tackle class, perhaps more so. They like the ability to get that tackle in round 2. They have Jonah Williams. They like what they saw from their O-line to a degree at the end of the season. And I think they just feel like they need an alpha receiver. You know, they have T. Higgins, who's pretty solid. They have Tyler Boyd, who's a very good slot receiver. But they feel like they need the alpha one. And I think you kind of look at what Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase had, and it was special. And I think they really want to get that. Not just because Joe Burrow is pushing for it, but because Joe Burrow is the perfect type of quarterback to unlock Jamar Chase's skill set. Because Jamar Chase is such an explosive vertical athlete. He can go up and make 50-50 catches, 80-20s, perhaps even more than that. And I think Burrow is the guy that's willing to give his receivers those contested balls. I think that's what unlocked T. Higgins' skill so well. I think the fit with Chase in Cincinnati is phenomenal. And I think that they realize that. And I think that there's perhaps no better fit for Jamar Chase than with his former quarterback. So I think that's what's going to end up happening.
Who do you think might fall in the first round that a lot of people have very high?
The most notable one that I can think of would be Micah Parsons out of Penn State. This is a guy that is very new to the linebacker position, has great athletic traits, could grow as in coverage, but he's not there yet. Has very raw instincts, was an edge rusher prior to this, so he has edge rusher traits as well, but he's raw. And not only is he raw, and you kind of look at what he is, he's not Devin White freaky. He's not, he's not even Devin Bush. He probably is on Devin Bush freaky level. He's not like Devin White freaky. And while he could be a player like Devin White, for example, he isn't there yet, and White was better in coverage coming out. White only had to learn the above the neck stuff. This is the guy, Mike Parsons is a guy that's very new to the position. And you kind of look at also the character concerns. Now, we don't know a ton about the validity of them. Obviously, the hazing incident is the big one. I think teams are vetting about that, but we've kind of heard that that's a concern from a lot of teams. So I think Parsons is a guy, especially in a talented linebacker class with guys like JOK, with Collins, with Jamin Davis flying up boards as well. I think we can see some teams pass on Parsons for perhaps a tackle, for perhaps a corner, like a J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain. We can see them, or like a Detroit could pass on him for a quarterback or one of the talented receivers that are still there. So I think there are teams that are just going to defer to better options. But I think his drop probably stops somewhere with like the Raiders at 17.
Okay, so no chance he would follow the Steelers.
It's always possible, but again, you kind of look for the character concerns. The Steelers have been down that road before, and the question is, do they want to take a chance again on that? They took chances on those guys in the 2010s with guys like Martavis Bryant, and then it burnt them a little bit at times. So the question is, do they want to do it again? I don't know. I think Parsons, if he's there at 24, is a strong candidate.
Another thing that's unique this year is the players that opted out, that sat out last year. And it was brought up in this press conference, and Colbert mentioned that. I thought it was telling that he said something like, if we're comparing one player that played and one player that didn't, we're going to favor the player that played. How many other teams do you think will also think that way, that they'll favor players that actually played last year over players that sat out.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting philosophy. But the thing is, the reasoning behind it, and listen, it's a very complex issue because you don't want to punish players for sitting out a pandemic year. Obviously, that's it, it's there's reasons behind that are very valid. The thing is, though, I think Colbert explained this. It's tough for guys when they sit out a year to get back into football shape, gear up for contact, and get back to what they were the year before. I think this is what he was getting at. And this is why. I don't even think it's about having tape. I think it's just the fact that it takes so much to gear up to get back to peak football condition. When you sit out a year like that, and a full year at that, I mean, these guys will, by the time September rolls around, they would have played football for nearly 2 years. So it's going to be a tough time to readjust for these guys that opted out. And I think that's kind of the reasoning. And, personally, if I was a GM, I wouldn't be against drafting these opt-outs. I think that there's a lot of talented opt-outs that you can reasonably get there, and you should trust your strength and conditioning staff to get them up there. But I do think that I think Tomlin and Colbert did explain something there, and I do think that's the way a lot of teams look at it. I don't think that they look at, as a thing of will or a thing of love for the game. I think they just look at, well, this is going to take you a tough time to readjust, perhaps even a full season.
Very interesting. That's interesting. We'll see if that's true. In future years, we'll see if that actually comes to happen. So, all right, sir. Hey, thanks so much. We're finally here. We finally didn't Colbert say something like we stopped doing mock drafts because they're pointless or something like that.
Yeah, they stopped doing mock drafts and instead they mocked themselves, where they essentially go, well, if we were at 1, this is who we would take, and it's so on each slot. And that's kind of their board now, I guess, and it's kind of interesting. I've never heard any other team doing it that way. So, yeah, he essentially called everything pointless. Said all the TV shows talk about the same 20 players, so I don't pay attention. Good old case GM Casey.
I'm so excited. We're only a few days away. It's finally here. We've been talking about this for months. I'm just. Yeah, I just want it. I just want it to happen. I just can't wait. It's gonna be like Christmas. I feel like Christmas just even for every team. I'm just so excited that it's actually gonna happen.
Same. I'm very excited to see kind of how it plays out, and I think this draft is gonna have some wacky ones just because of the pandemic and kind of everything that has gone on with the process. I think this year has a chance to be a
wacky and inaccurate. Do you think there might be a lot more busts this year, or a lot more just players just missing out for all the various reasons, either the missing the year, not getting the medicals, or just not having all the information? Do you think a lot of teams could just miss on this draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely possible. Again, because you don't have the in-person thing, so like the in-person thing where you get to know people really deep. Like I think the Steelers said that they usually meet with the players' parents. Like they sit down for dinner. They do all this stuff. Like it's a more detailed process, especially with the medicals too. I think the medicals are going to be something. I think a lot of busts might not be because of what they do on the field. I think it's because of off the field stuff or the medicals. So it's possible we see busts because of that. Yeah.
It makes you wonder how little things like that, like meeting the parents, playing rock paper scissors, or like that draft day movie, if finding out if people went to someone's birthday party. I mean, it's silly, but there might be things like that might cause a team to love or hate a player.
Yeah, and it's crazy like how much stuff can change and how these guys evaluate these players, and you never know the specifics behind it. So these little things, and I mean, even big things like medicals, I mean, that's a huge part of the equation. It's going to change how we look at the draft this year. Absolutely.
Who is the player that has a bunch of rap albums out already?
Kadarius Toney, I believe.
I'm not sure, but I mean, I've heard people say
Kadarius Toney and Jalen Phillips are both rap artists.
Maybe it was Jalen Phillips I was thinking of that,
Mhm.
that I actually heard people say, does he even care about football or something like that?
Yeah, they're both passionate rap artists. So, and Jalen Phillips also a musical theater guy. Interesting.
Interesting. All right, sir. Hey, thanks so much. Have fun Thursday and Friday. It's finally here. Hope it's a blast.
Yes, thank you. Always a great time to be on here. NFL
All
draft
right.
can be fun.
Yep. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
See ya. Bye.
Yeah.